Okay, the next thing we need to talk about populations is the age structure. And this is basically the proportion of the population in different age classes. And we can actually tell if the population is growing, stable, or declining based on this age structure. And this is because we only have babies during a certain part of our life. So if there is a lot of young people, then we can say that a lot of them are going to come up and be of reproductive age soon, and that's going to make the population grow faster. If we have about the same number of people in all the different age classes, like you can see here for Sweden, then it's going to be stable because the same people that aren't reproductive yet are going to move into the reproductive category and have babies, and then it's not going to make the population go up dramatically. If the population is declining, we can see that there are fewer young people than there are of reproductive ages. So the number of children being born right now is going to be more than will be in the future because there'll be fewer people in this reproductive age category in a few years when these people are in the reproductive age category. So we can see, you can tell really easily with these curves whether a population is growing, stable, or declining. So if it looks kind of like this triangle shape where it's really fat on the bottom and skinny on the top, that means that the population is growing really rapidly. If it looks about the same like a column all the way down, then that's a stable population. And it will be declining if there's kind of a bulge in the middle, means that there are fewer people that are going to come up to reproductive age. So that's a good way to tell what's going on with the population. So next I want to talk about the demographic transition model. And this is a general pattern of declining death rates and fertility rates due to improved living conditions accompanying economic development. So different countries go through these different stages through time as they become industrialized, and that affects their population growth and their different demographic rates. So we start with the pre-industrial stage. There tends to be poor conditions that keep death rates high, but the birth rates are also high. There's a lot of incentives if there's a lot of people working on the family farm to have more people that can help on the family farm. But also if you are losing a lot of children, you're probably going to have more children to still be able to have a family if you're expected to lose some of them while they're still children. All right, so that's stage one. Stage two is when a country starts industrializing. Economic development brings in a better standard of living and the death rates fall. In this stage, birth rates stay the same or even rise. Cultural changes take a while to come into being. All right, so stage three is when they're fully industrial. We have a mature industrial economy in the country. Birth rates begin to fall as people see most of their children survive. It becomes more expensive to have a lot of children if you're trying to give them all a higher standard of living. Also, in this stage, there's more people working, and so there's more choices for women of what to do with their lives than just to be a mother and take care of children. And so that also contributes to lowering the birth rates. Populations continue to grow during this stage, though, due to momentum. Then we have the post-industrial stage, stage 4. The transition is complete, and both death and birth rates become low, and the population size becomes stable. So this shows what that looks like on a graph. So we have the birth and death rate per 1,000 people on the y-axis here. And then we also have the total population on the y-axis, and we have time. So we start here in pre-industrial. The population size is fairly low, and the birth and death rates are pretty high. When we start industrializing, we see that the death rates start to go down. There's a higher standard of living. there's more access to medical care, there's more food being distributed to more people. The birth rates stay high in this stage. As we get to a industrial economy, we see that the death rates continue to fall and start to stable out, and the birth rate starts falling. And then in the final stage, the post-industrial stage, we see that both birth and death rates stabilize. The population is high, but it's stable. It's not increasing, it's not decreasing. So we see stage 1, stable but low population size through stage 2 and 3, the industrializing and the industrial stages, the population grows. During these time periods, we see death rate fall first and then birth rate. And then once we get to post-industrial, we get to a stable population size. And so if we think about R, if we'll go back to that per capita rate of population change, it's all about births minus deaths. So here, R is going to be 0. It's stable. Up here, R is 0. It's stable. R is greater than 0 during these two phases, which means that shows that the population is growing. Okay, so another important thing to think about is kind of the quality of life. And so there was this index developed called the Human Development Index that is kind of a measure of quality of life of the people in the country. And it is based on a number of different measures, but some key ones are life expectancy, how educated the population is, and the per capita income. And so we see this varies widely among different countries. As we talked about before, we see that Scandinavia and Australia are doing very well. Here, Japan is more intermediate, in line with what the United States is doing. And then we see kind of countries that are more medium in Central and South America, and some pockets in Asia. And then it's much lower in most of sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so we've been talking about human population growth, which is what this chapter is all about. And kind of one of the big concerns about human population growth is the impact on the environment and the availability of resources to people into the future so that we can continue to have good quality of life. And so a lot of times people are just worried about human population size, and that's really not fair, because most of the people that are being added to the population have really low ecological footprints. So what is an ecological footprint? It is the impact of a person or community on the environment, expressed as the amount of land required to sustain their use of natural resources, and also the absorption of the waste produced by those people or that community. So basically you add up the impact and the amount of land required to produce all the food you eat, all the things you buy, all the services you use, and absorb all the waste. So that includes wastewater, trash, but also the carbon dioxide coming out of your car when you drive around. So any waste that's produced in any of the things you're using get calculated into this. And so, as I said, people that live in countries that tend to be poorer, usually where the population is growing faster, tend to have extremely low ecological footprints. They're not using a lot of resources because they're so poor they can't afford it. Whereas people in more developed countries use a lot of resources because they have all these conveniences, they can buy what they want to buy, and all of this increases their ecological footprint. Also, traveling and your diet also affects your ecological footprint quite a lot. And so we see that ecological footprints are different across the world, and this shows it by country, and certainly there are people in all of these countries that have higher and lower. So this is just like the average. And so we see that the countries with the highest ecological footprints are the United States and Canada. There are some very rich Middle Eastern countries that are also very small that have very high ecological footprints. Australia and New Zealand's are very high, and then some parts of Europe are very high. Places that are more intermediate include most of South America, a good bit of Russia, and then some other countries scattered here and there, including Japan. And then the countries that have the lowest ecological footprint tend to be these ones where population is growing. So each one of those people actually affects resource use and resource availability of the planet as a whole very, very little. But more people in these countries in red and orange affect resource availability greatly because they're using so many more resources. So to put this in a little bit different terms, there's an equation for environmental impact. So this is I, environmental impact, is equal to population size times affluence times technology. And so these things need to all be taken into account when we're thinking about environmental impact. It's not just population size. Having more people in really poor countries is not nearly as important as having more people that are very affluent and getting on airplanes all the time and buying as much stuff as they want and living in really big houses and things like that. So when you add all these up, all of them are important to environmental impact.